Close your eyes for just a moment. Can you remember the smell of a Monday morning in 1957? Not a vague impression, the actual smell. Coal dust and carbolic soap. Damp wool drying on a wooden clothes horse shoved too close to the fireplace. The faint metallic tang of a kettle that had been on the hob since before you woke up. If you can smell that, if something in your chest just shifted when I said it, then you were there. And this is for you, because today we are not simply talking about objects. We are talking about the texture of a life. We are talking about the things that sat in the corners and on the shelves and under the stairs of every British home in the 1950s. Things so ordinary, so utterly taken for granted that nobody thought to mourn them when they went. And yet they did go. Every single one of them. Quietly, without ceremony, they slipped away. And with them went a whole way of being alive in Britain that can never quite be recovered. So let us go back together. Let us walk through the front door of that house. Your grandparents' house, perhaps, or your parents', or your own. And remember what was there. The first thing you notice, stepping into almost any British home of the 1950s, is the coal scuttle. It sits beside the fireplace like a faithful old dog. Black, battered, usually made of stamped steel or sometimes a heavier cast iron, with a rolled lip and a small shovel tucked alongside it. In 1951, more than 12 million British homes were still heated exclusively by open coal fires. 12 million British households in 1951. The coal scuttle was not an accessory, it was survival. You carried it in from the coal shed, that small, soot-blackened outbuilding at the back of most terraced houses, filled from the street by the coalman, who came every fortnight with his horse-drawn cart until the mid-50s, and then with his lorry. You can still feel the weight of a full scuttle in your arms, can't you? The way the coal shifted and clunked as you walked. The fine black dust that settled on your sleeves no matter how carefully you carried it. And then the particular art of banking the fire at night. Pushing the glowing embers together, covering them just so with slack coal and damp newspaper, so that the hearth would still hold a little warmth come morning. The Clean Air Act of 1956 began its slow work across the country. After the Great Smog of 1952 had killed somewhere between 4,000 and 12,000 Londoners in 5 terrible days. By 1965, smokeless zones were spreading into every major city. Central heating arrived and the scuttle was left behind. The coal scuttle was left behind, and with it, the particular ritual of the fire. The family gathered around it in the evenings. The warmth that came from one single point in the room and drew everyone toward it like moths. Standing in the hallway, just inside the front door, you would almost certainly find the telephone table. Not every home had a telephone in 1950. In fact, only about 1 in 10 British households did at the start of that decade. But by 1959, that number had climbed considerably, and the telephone had become something almost ceremonial. It was given its own piece of furniture. A small dedicated table, sometimes with a seat attached, sometimes just a narrow shelf with a drawer for the directory, positioned in the draftiest, most public part of the house. You did not make telephone calls lounging about. You stood upright at the telephone table or perched on its hard little seat, and you spoke loudly and clearly because the line was never quite reliable, and you were always aware that your voice was carrying down the hall and through the walls. The telephone itself was almost always a Bakelite model. Black, heavy, with a rotary dial that gave a satisfying mechanical click as it spun. The GPO, the General Post Office, rented most of them to households rather than selling them outright, which meant you never truly owned the instrument you used every day. The telephone table has almost no modern equivalent. When the telephone became small enough to live in your pocket, the idea of a dedicated space for conversation, a physical place where the act of speaking to someone distant was treated as a significant event, simply dissolved. And something about the gravity of communication went with it. Move into the front room, the best room, the room that wasn't really for living in, and you will find the china cabinet. Every single household in Britain had one. It stood against the wall, usually in dark wood, with glass panels in the upper doors, and it held the things that were too good for Tuesday. Wedding china kept for special occasions. The tea service brought out only for the vicar or a particularly admired aunt. A set of crystal glasses that clinked with a clear high note when you tapped them and that had never once held any actual crystal. The china cabinet was a statement about aspiration. It said, "We have things worth preserving." It said, "We know how to live properly." The contents were almost never used. That was rather the point. And yet they were dusted and rearranged with tremendous care. In working-class homes particularly, where every shilling was accounted for, the display of fine things behind glass was a form of pride that required no apology whatsoever. Somewhere in the 1970s, as informality swept through British domestic life and open-plan kitchens made best and everyday harder to separate, the china cabinet began its retreat. By the 1990s, it was largely confined to antique shops and the homes of grandmothers who still believed, quite correctly, that a table set properly with the right china made the food taste better. On the mantelpiece above that coal fire, you would find the wooden clock. Not a digital display, not a battery-operated quartz movement. A wind-up clock, usually a mantel clock in a dark wooden case with a face of cream enamel, brass hands, and a mechanism that required winding every 7 days without fail. You were given this responsibility as a child, or your father took it, or your mother did it silently as part of the 10,000 quiet labors that kept a household running. The clock ticked. This is not a trivial thing to mention. It ticked audibly, all day and all night, a steady mechanical heartbeat that became so familiar you stopped consciously hearing it, until the clock ran down and the silence was suddenly enormous. The chime, if it had one, marked every quarter hour through the night. In 1955, you could buy a reasonable mantel clock for around £2.10, roughly the equivalent of 2 days' wages for an average worker. These clocks lasted for decades, many lasted a lifetime. They simply required attention. The batteries not included age swept them away. Clocks became disposable, silent, unmissable. Village. The idea of a clock that demanded your weekly care, that was in a relationship with you, became a curiosity rather than a commonplace. Step into the kitchen and look at the wall beside the cooker. There it is, the wooden plate rack, fixed directly to the wall above the sink and draining board. Every washed dish went straight up onto the rack to drip and air dry. There were no electric dishwashers in British homes in the early 1950s. The first domestic models would not appear until the very late 50s, and they remained rare and expensive well into the 60s. Washing up was done by hand in the sink, with a bar of hard soap, or, by mid-decade, a new powder called Dreft, which smelled of something trying very hard to be cheerful. The plate rack had a warmth to it. The damp wood had its own particular smell, a clean, slightly mineral scent, and the clatter of plates being slotted in was one of the reliable rhythms of the evening. There was a hierarchy to washing up. Glasses first when the water was hottest and cleanest, then the china, then the pots and pans last. The conversation that happened during washing up, the quiet, sideways kind of talking that happens when nobody is looking directly at anyone, was some of the most honest conversation a family managed all week. When fitted kitchens arrived in force in the 1960s and 1970s, they came with enclosed cupboards and the implicit promise that everything should be hidden. The plate rack was painted over, or removed, or simply shamed into irrelevance. But what went with it was that evening ritual, that half hour of standing together at the sink where things got said that might never have been said at the table. In the pantry, that small, cool room off the kitchen that every house built before 1945 seemed to include almost as a matter of course, you would find the marble slab. A thick piece of grey or creamy white marble, usually about 2 feet by 3, set onto a wooden shelf. This was where the butter sat, the cheese wrapped in muslin, the leftover joint covered with a mesh food cover held down by little glass beads around its weighted edge to keep the flies out. The refrigerator existed in the 1950s, but in 1950 fewer than 2% of British households owned one. By 1959, that had climbed to 13%, still a minority. In the pantry, that small, cool room off the kitchen, you would find the marble slab. The marble slab stayed cool even on the warmest summer days. It held the chill in its stone in a way that was almost miraculous to a child who pressed a warm palm to it. The relationship between a household and its specific registered grocer was intimate and practical in a way that the anonymous supermarket would never replicate. The marble slab was thrown away or sold at a jumble sale. And the cold, quiet, faintly cave-like magic of that room, where the food was kept and the preserves were stored, and the world seemed held at a slight remove, went with it. Back in the front room, look down. Beside the sideboard, you will find the footstool, covered in a fabric that your grandmother almost certainly embroidered herself. Covered in a fabric that your grandmother almost certainly embroidered herself, or one that came with a tapestry panel worked in wool on a canvas grid. A cottage, a spray of flowers, a rather stern-looking Labrador. Embroidery kits were sold in their millions in the 1950s. Needlework was not a genteel hobby, it was an expectation. Your hands were to be occupied. The footstool sat at the feet of the armchair and served its literal purpose, supporting tired legs, and also served as a kind of display of female industry. The finished piece sat in the room for the next 30 years, being quietly admired by no one and slowly faded by the light from the window. The finished piece sat in the room for the next 30 years, being quietly admired by no one and slowly faded by the light from the window. Television took the quiet hours. The idea of spending 100 evenings making something for a footstool became almost incomprehensible to a younger generation. The footstools remain here and there. Someone's hours, someone's evenings. Still there, if you know where to look. A polished wooden cabinet with a tuning dial whose needle swept across the names of stations: Luxembourg, Hilversum, Home Service, with a warm, amber glow. On the sideboard you would find, among other things, the wireless. Not a radio, the wireless. A substantial piece of furniture in its own right. You listened to the news, and you believed what you heard. The voice from the wireless was what told you, and it was the voice of something large and calm. A polished wooden cabinet with a tuning dial whose needle swept across the names of stations: Luxembourg, Hilversum, Home Service, with a warm amber glow. In 1950, the BBC Light programme was the heartbeat of the British home, Housewife's Choice, Workers' Playtime. Over 27 million people listened every day. In 1950, it was estimated that over 27 million people, more than half the country's population, listened to the BBC every single day. The wireless was not background noise, it was attended to. People sat near it. They turned toward it. You listened to the news at 6 and at 9, and you believed what you heard. And when something terrible happened, and things did happen in those early Cold War years, in those fragile years of post-war uncertainty, you listened to the news at 6 and at 9, and you believed what you heard. And when something terrible happened, and things did happen in those early Cold War years, in those fragile years of post-war uncertainty. When television arrived and the transistor radio shrank the wireless to something you carried in a pocket, the great polished cabinet became obsolete. The warm amber glow went out. It was moved to the garage or the spare room, or it was sold. The warm amber glow went out. Look more carefully at the sideboard and you will notice the aspidistra, the cast iron plant. The aspidistra had been a fixture of the British working-class home since the Victorian era. It required almost nothing: dim light and infrequent watering. Aspidistra elatia in its pot, almost always a heavy ceramic pot in a dark green or terracotta glaze, sitting in the bay window or on the sideboard or just inside the front window where it could be seen from the street, which was precisely the point. Aspidistra elatia in its pot, almost always a heavy ceramic pot in a dark green or terracotta glaze, sitting in the bay window or on the sideboard or just inside the front window where it could be seen from the street, which was precisely the point. Aspidistra elatia in its pot, almost always a heavy ceramic pot in a dark green or terracotta glaze, sitting in the bay window or on the sideboard or just inside the front window where it could be seen from the street, which was precisely the point. But that is not how the plant felt from inside the house. The aspidistra was endurance. Its broad, dark leaves, which you were expected to wipe with a damp cloth weekly to keep them glossy, were almost impossibly robust. It did not ask for much. It did not complain. Its broad, dark leaves, which you were expected to wipe with a damp cloth weekly to keep them glossy, were almost impossibly robust. It did not ask for much. It did not complain. By the late 1960s, the aspidistra was considered hopelessly old-fashioned. Younger homeowners wanted spider plants and rubber plants, but that is not how the plant felt from inside the house. The aspidistra was endurance. In the bedroom, the main bedroom, the one your parents occupied, the one you crept into on Sunday mornings, you would find the washstand. In the bedroom, you would find the washstand. In homes without an indoor bathroom, the washstand was the morning ritual. In the bedroom, you would find the washstand. In homes without an indoor bathroom, the washstand was the morning ritual. A ceramic basin and jug holding cold water poured from a larger jug the night before. You washed in that water. Cold, usually. You washed your face and hands with a flannel. The washstand required of you a consciousness about water, its weight, its temperature. The consciousness it carried, that careful, considered relationship with water, did not survive the bath taps. The great housing improvement programs of the late 1950s and 1960s, when indoor bathrooms were finally installed. In the bedroom, the main bedroom, the one your parents occupied, the one you crept into on Sunday mornings, you would find the washstand. In the bedroom, you would find the washstand. In homes without an indoor bathroom, the washstand was the morning ritual. The consciousness it carried, that careful, considered relationship with water, did not survive the bath taps. Downstairs again, under the stairs, you would find, among the accumulated mystery of everything a British family didn't quite know where else to put, the tin bath. Downstairs again, under the stairs, you would find, among the accumulated mystery of everything a British family didn't quite know where else to put, the tin bath. Every Friday night, or Saturday, in some households, the tin bath was carried into the kitchen and placed in front of the range or the fire. Every Friday night, or Saturday in some households, the tin bath was carried into the kitchen and placed in front of the range or the fire. There was an order to who bathed, the youngest children first, then the adults in cooling water grown grey and slightly soapy. Every Friday night, or Saturday in some households, the tin bath was carried into the kitchen and placed in front of the range or the fire. The physical effort of the tin bath, the carrying, the heating, the emptying out into the garden drain afterward, made bathing a significant event rather than a daily assumption. The physical effort of the tin bath, the carrying, the heating, the emptying out into the garden drain afterward, made bathing a significant event rather than a daily assumption. The tin bath went to the shed, and a certain respect for the labour of ordinary comfort went quietly with it. In the kitchen again, look at the wall beside the back door. There will be the ration book. By 1950, rationing had been in place for over a decade. In the kitchen again, look at the wall beside the back door. There will be the ration book. By 1950, rationing had been in place for over a decade. Meat rationing would not end until 1954. It was July 4th, 1954, a Tuesday, when the last restrictions finally lifted. Meat rationing would not end until 1954. Britain's housewives stood in queues to buy as much meat as they pleased for the first time in 14 years. The ration book was a booklet with coupons to be cancelled by the shopkeeper. The relationship with your specific grocer was intimate and practical. The ration book was a booklet with coupons to be cancelled by the shopkeeper. The relationship with your specific grocer was intimate and practical. The relationship between a household and its specific registered grocer was intimate and practical in a way that the anonymous supermarket would never replicate. When rationing ended, the book became a document of an emergency that was over. People kept them because going without had been a shared experience. People tucked them away in drawers and sometimes kept them for the rest of their lives without quite knowing why. Because they meant something. People tucked them away in drawers and sometimes kept them for the rest of their lives without quite knowing why. Because they meant something. Look again around the front room at the picture rail. Not the pictures themselves, but the rail. Every house built before 1940 had them. That narrow strip of moulding running around the room at about a foot below the ceiling, from which pictures were hung on long metal hooks and wire or cord. Every house built before 1940 had picture rails. They were architectural, they were assumed, and they were used constantly. You did not drill into walls in the 1950s. The picture rail was the solution. Hang your hooks and let your pictures dangle at whatever height you chose. The picture rail was the solution that had been built into the house. Hang your hooks from the rail and let your pictures dangle at whatever height you chose, adjustable by letting out or shortening the wire, requiring no marks on the wall whatsoever. The pictures that hung from those rails were almost universally framed prints or oil paintings or watercolors, or, in many working-class homes, large photographic portraits. Wedding photographs, portraits of grandparents, school photographs of children in rows. Because these stories belong to all of us. Britain's quiet, domestic, everyday story is worth keeping. Every last ordinary, irreplaceable piece of it. Because these stories belong to all of us. Britain's quiet, domestic, everyday story is worth keeping. Every last ordinary, irreplaceable piece of it. The electric drill made holes in walls easy. The pictures came down from their wires and were rehung with raw plugs and screws. Fixed in position, inflexible, requiring real commitment. And the walls grew somehow less inhabited. Beside the front door, on the inside, or just inside the hallway, there was the draft excluder. Not the elegant modern ones, not the brush strips set into doors by professional fitters. The 1950s draft excluder was a sausage-shaped fabric tube, usually about 3 feet long, stuffed hard with sand or sawdust, lying along the bottom of the front door like a sleeping animal. Many were made at home from old stockings or trouser legs, sewn shut at both ends, filled with whatever came to hand. Some were made to look like sausage dogs, a long body in brown velvet with embroidered features, which was considered charming and also highly practical. The draft in a 1950s house was not a mild inconvenience. The gap under the front door could admit a wind that moved the curtains and raised gooseflesh. The gap under the front door could admit a wind that moved the curtains in the hall and raised gooseflesh on the backs of your arms. The draft excluder was the front line of defense against a winter that came straight in off the street. By the 1980s and 1990s, double glazing had replaced the wooden sash windows, and fitted draft strips and threshold seals had been professionalized. The sand-filled sausage dog was retired. The last ones sit in boxes in attics, their velvet faces faded, their stuffing settled to one end from decades of being kicked back against the door on winter mornings. They are both ridiculous and completely magnificent. The way the family gathered at the table for the largest meal of the week, the good china out, the tablecloth used, the ritual of carving observed with something approaching ceremony. Because Sunday, in a British home in the 1950s, was a sensory event as distinctive as any physical object. The smell of the roast building from 11 o'clock onward, beef or lamb, whichever had been affordable that week, with potatoes roasting in the fat beneath. The particular silence of Sunday streets, broken only by distant church bells. Sunday was structured. It was a pause that the rest of the week breathed around. The way the family gathered at the table for the largest meal of the week, the good china out, the tablecloth used, the ritual of carving observed with something approaching ceremony. Sunday was structured. It had rules. Shops closed, sport mostly forbidden, the wireless more subdued. It was a pause that the rest of the week breathed around. The way the family gathered at the table for the largest meal of the week, the good china out, the tablecloth used, the ritual of carving observed with something approaching ceremony. Look again around the front room at the picture rail. Not the pictures themselves, but the rail. Every house built before 1940 had them. And now you are standing outside again, on the pavement, looking back at that house, the front window with its aspidistra. And now you are standing outside again, looking back at that house, the front window with its aspidistra, the curtains slightly lit from within. Because today, we are not simply talking about objects. We are talking about the texture of a life. It was not a simpler time. It was, in many ways, a harder time, a colder time, a time of real and considerable privation. But it was a time when the objects around you made demands of you. They asked to be wound and carried and filled and wiped and tended. And in being tended, they made you part of something. Part of the house, part of the family, part of the long, ordinary story of ordinary British life. If any of this brought something back for you, then please don't let it go. Leave a comment below and tell us what you remember. Tell us what sat in your grandmother's front room. Tell us what your Monday mornings smelled of. Tell us what you miss, even the things you didn't know you missed until just now. Because these stories belong to all of us, and if we don't tell them, they disappear as completely as the coal scuttle and the ration book and the sand-filled sausage dog. If any of this brought something back for you, then please don't let it go. Leave a comment below and tell us what you remember. Every last ordinary, irreplaceable piece of it.